Hello, and thank you for listening to the History of World War II podcast episode. Honestly, I don't know. I know it's more than half a thousand, but let's just leave it at that. Anyways, I'd like to welcome back two friends of mine, Ryan Fairfield and Tony Lupo from
You
the
said my name first, Tony.
exactly, and just remember that you owe me $20 from the very respectable The Warrior Next Door podcast. So, gentlemen, if you would like to take a couple of moments, more Ryan than Tony, introduce yourselves and tell us about your podcast, please.
Tony, you go first. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. That's so magnanimous.
You said my name first, so you go first.
Totally.
Okay.
So why bask
I don't want
in
you
the
to cry.
glory?
It's going to be
All
a long night.
So here's the scrap that Ryan and Ray threw me. So I'm Tony Lupo, co-host of The Warrior Next Door. We've had a chance to co-produce some content with Ray a couple times in the past. We really enjoy it. We appreciate Ray reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, let's go ahead and do this shit and see how it works." Right. Our podcast, The Warrior Next Door, focuses on sharing the oral histories that Ryan and I collect as citizen historians and volunteers for the Library of Congress. And we think that dovetails nicely with what Ray does, because most of our stories come from World War II vets that lived in our community, hence the Next Door part of The Warrior Next Door. And sometimes we even have a chance to share some of these stories with Ray on his program. So, Ryan, what would you like to add? I don't know if you can. That was pretty eloquent, but go ahead.
I don't. Thanks for saying everything. I don't have anything left to talk about.
Exactly.
No, Tony and I have been friends for a long time, and we've geeked out on World War II history for decades, literally decades, as I'm sure many of the people who listen to this show regularly do. And we just want to thank you again, Ray, for coordinating this and providing an outlet for Tony to make a fool of himself yet again.
Trust me when I say it is my pleasure. And the fact that it's being recorded, it just makes me happy. I just get giddy. No, this is forever. I mean, civilizations will fall, but this recording will last. Oh, look at that, Tony. Oh, that guy cracks me up. No, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great. Yeah.
Someday our great-great-grandkids will be watching older episodes of you two and say, "Yeah, I remember Mom saying something about," and they're going to see this shit and go, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
That's related to
why
these guys?
Why did Grandpa do that?
That's where I came from. Really? You couldn't? Okay. No, it's fine. Yeah. So anyways, for those of you who remember when we did the amazing, the incredible, the top 5 World War II movies, where absolutely nobody disagreed with any of our selections.
No, it was definitive.
It was. There's no reason. It's done. It's done.
Yep.
The same thing here. Maybe I should tell everybody what the show is about. I kind of messed that up already. So anyways, this is the top 5 mistakes the Axis or Hitler, I think when we first started talking, Hitler made. If you say Pearl Harbor in this one, I'm not sure how involved he was, but I'm not. You do you. I'm not going to tell you what to say. So anyways, the top 5 mistakes that Hitler made, and like the top 5 movies, we're going to start at number 5 and work our way up. And it's only a matter of time before this gets out of control. So can I just say now, here are the rules. Cheap shots are not only allowed, they're encouraged. Be careful on your mama jokes, but it depends on the context. So other than that, at the end, we'll just see who does the best or the worst, and they get the trophy. But we'll worry about that later. Well, don't worry about that for now. So yeah. Would anybody like to throw anything in, or should we just jump right in? Because the last time we did this, we were together for 2 hours. And I don't know if your wives have ever told you this, but spending 2 hours with guys, that's a long time. So we can do this any way you want. But
every time we do a recording session, Ray, I got to go sit in a dark room in my recliner, and I just rock back and forth for about 4 hours just to kind of get re-equilibrated. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
So let's enjoy this while we can. I've got the dump button turned off. There's no turning back now. If we say it, it's there.
Good. Now, actually, I'll just say this real quick. Sorry, Ryan. The ironic thing is that my wife looks forward to when you come on the show, because she knows that's at least 2 solid hours that she doesn't have to deal with all of this. So that's all I'm saying. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, okay. So, Ryan, you want to start us off? We'll go around the horn. Number 5 for you would be, my friend.
All right. So I'm going to say this is something that I've thought about for quite a while, and you don't really see this listed as maybe a blunder, but I consider it a blunder. And I think the amount of material and expense that was put into building the Atlantic Wall
Ooh,
was
good one.
a blunder, because Hitler and the Nazi leaders, they thought the attack was going to come across the channel up the Pas de Calais,
Right.
and for good reason. It wasn't far behind the Pas de Calais, where we had Peenemünde, and we had a number of the V2 sites that were being built, and the underground factories, as well as it was one of the more direct routes straight to Berlin from that far north and everything. So they had good reason to think that. But they started building the Atlantic Wall in 1940, right after France fell, and the amount of men and material that went into building this fortification all along the coast of France and all the way northward up into Norway, was a huge redirection of resources. Now, a lot of it was slave labor, but in the end, we came across in one spot and we were over it in a day.
Right. Exactly.
So that's my number 5 right there.
Can I just say real quick before you jump in, Tony? Yeah, because they spend all this time when they could have been doing something else. Yes, slave labor, but they could have been doing something else. And it's almost like the Maginot Line. Oh wow, that's really impressive. We're just going to go over the top. We're just going to, where's the end? Oh, there's the end. Okay, So again, all that effort, all for naught. Sorry, Tony.
No, not at all. I was just going to say it was millennia before World War II, before you could point to walls like around the city of Rome that actually did effectively keep invading forces out for 1,000 years in Rome's case. And there's a couple of spare examples during the Middle Ages, and I'm sure in Eastern history there are examples of that as well. But I mean, the Great Wall of China wasn't effective. I mean, that ended up, being breached at certain points and whatnot. So yeah, I agree 100%. That's the problem with that. You spend all that money, treasure, labor building this intricate thing, and all you need is one little weak point or one place where you can go around it. So yeah, I agree, Ryan. That's a good number 5. That's a huge dump and waste. And at the end of the day, I forgot the statistics. I said once the Allies came up onto, so you got the Atlantic Wall, and then you got the West Wall, which was supposed to keep them out of Germany. Both of those were supposed to be impenetrable. And I think I read somewhere that when the American forces made it to the West Wall, which was another one of these fortified walls, it took them like 2 days to breach it.
Right. Modern technology. And
the amount of steel and concrete that went into it, I mean, that's a resource, that you can't get back. And once it's sunk and, into those fortifications, it's there. And once you step over it, because remember, we had airplanes,
Oh, they go over the wall, right? Does that sound right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Paratroopers, imagine that.
Yeah. And this harkens back to one of Hitler's, one of his weaknesses in his strategic thinking was he was enamored with fixed fortifications. Look at the Channel Islands, for instance. He did the same thing with the Channel Islands, with Guernsey and everything. And, in the end, you're right, with the Maginot Line, that was another example of it, where it was a big mistake, I think.
Yeah.
So
technology alone negated that.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
So, all right. Well,
T.
Tony, what's up? What do you think? What do you got?
Mine would be Germany's lack of a proper U-boat force at the start of the war. In 1939, Germany had 57 U-boats. And it was well known that Dönitz and others threw numbers out there like they needed 200 to 250 to properly apply Wolfpack tactics, which ended up working beautifully. And in fact, they were applied by the Americans in the Pacific during World War II to great effect because we did have enough U-boats. And here's why it's such a big blunder. Because they knew it was effective. In World War I, the Germans actually had a sizable surface fleet that tactically defeated the British at the Battle of Jutland in 1916, but not strategically defeated them because they left that area in the North Sea and never came out to fight again. But their U-boats in World War I, which were a shadow of the type of technology they had in World War II, brought Great Britain to their knees. In World War II, no greater source than Winston Churchill himself was often quoted. And you would know this, Ray, because you've done an amazing series on Winston Churchill, and I'm pretty sure you covered this part, that the biggest fear that he had, the darkest hour for Great Britain, was having to deal with the U-boat threat. And
Absolutely.
so for example, during World War II, the German U-boats, and like I said, this was a tactic they knew could be employed successfully if they had the numbers, sank 175 warships, 2,825 merchant ships, or almost 3,000 Allied ships were sunk.
Mhm.
They sank and sent to the bottom 14 million gross tons of shipping that was important to keep, the British Isles alive and whatnot.
Right.
And all of this was done with a U-boat force that started off with 57 U-boats in 1939. Now, by the end of the war, they would have built 1,162 U-boats, and they lost almost 800 of them, a 70% loss rate. So they paid dearly for not having the boats that they needed early on to really strangle Britain before the United States got in the war, when they knew it was a winning strategy that they applied beautifully in World War I. So that's my number 5.
That's a good one, and I'll add on to that to make it even more powerful. God, I can't believe we're working together. So not only should have had more earlier, because you're right, it was very effective, and the anti-submarine tactics were very weak at that time. That won't change until 43. But Donitz, who eventually becomes in charge of the German Navy, because I did a whole series on this. It takes him a while. I think it takes him until late 42, 43. To take the bunch of scientists, excuse me, the bunch of nerds, the bunch of scientists, the ones who were coming up with making U-boat technology better, sonar and all that good stuff. It takes him a while, way too long, to incorporate that or put that under him completely, so he can control it down to the minutia. He can tell him exactly what he wants. It takes him a while to do that, and when he does do it, late 43, early 44, the Americans and the British and the Canadians and others are going, oh shit, because they had passed in terms of technology, the Axis in 43. So if he had done that a year or two earlier, not only would he eventually have 1,000 U-boats, but they would have been much better as far as their offensive and defensive capability. So that's a very good number 5, and that's very painful for me to say, but it's one of those great what ifs, right? It's like, this works. Why would you not? And going back and tying the two together, the steel that went into the wall. How many tanks would that have been? How many planes would that have been? How many guns? How many U-boats? I mean, I don't know. I don't do those number things, but a lot. I'm thinking if it's a giant ass wall.
Right.
So, anyways, but. Oh, and that kind of ties into what my number 5 is. So bringing it home, bringing it all together. So because I was thinking about this, and I didn't just want to do like, oh, here's 5 battles in a row. I try to step outside of that. So for my number 5, it's that this wasn't just a war of conquest. For Hitler, it was about ideology. It was about reshaping the world the way he thought it would be. So just to give you an example. I've been around for a while. There's a couple of decades. There's a lot of gray hair. So anyways, so a lot of the older books, when they would write about World War II, when they would write about Hitler, they use the word warlord. And as far as Hitler is concerned, it would have been better if he had just been a warlord, but he was also a politician. He was a political animal and he was a military animal. And because of his ideology, instead of just conquering Europe, he wanted to, he read about Caesar. He read about Alexander the Great. He read about Napoleon. He wanted to reshape everything. So he put resources into stuff that he shouldn't have been that worried about. Just capture the Jews for now. They had tens of thousands of trains moving millions of Jews around, the Romani, POWs, others, that kind of thing. So all those trains that could have been sending supplies to the front, the various supplies, and I'm sure we will get to this at some point, but again, they're being squandered on his political agenda, because, it's not going to affect you whether you win the war, how many Jews you eliminate, with all due respect, things like that. And so all the material that went into, because even though the SS had their own divisions, they had the best of everything because they were SS. They had their own divisions out in the Eastern Front, and they had them in France, but they also had tens of thousands of SS members, in charge of the camps, in charge of barracks, that kind of stuff, when they could have been, fighting, trying to rid Germany of some of its enemies. So again, more resources wasted because of an idea versus Let's just kick everybody's ass now, and then we'll worry about all the political, ideological stuff. But he was combining them together. But it was literally the hatred of Hitler towards the Slavs, towards the Jews, towards the Romani, towards everybody. So one, we have to get rid of them. That takes a lot of resources. And two, we can never partner with these people, even in the short term. And I'm sure we're going to get to this. I don't want to preface go too far, but when it comes to the Eastern Front, the Third Reich had a wonderful opportunity to make even temporary allies out of the Slavs between the German border and Moscow. And they didn't, and they couldn't because of Hitler's ideology. So again, just a horrible waste of resources. And I'll just make this last point. Hardly anybody in the Soviet Russia liked Stalin. Between the famines in the Ukraine, 1932-33, the purges, 1936 to 1938, there were enough millions of Russians who hated Stalin, not that it mattered because he had all the guns. Mm-hmm. But then the Germans come in. And the Germans could have said, yes, we are your liberators, because these people literally projected onto the Germans, oh, you're here to save us from Stalin. Yeah. They only had to be this nice, and they could have had millions of allies, whether they fought or whether they just gathered food, whatever. They blew it because they couldn't. So it was instead of just war, just out and out defeat your opponents, because there was so much wrapped up in it, because he could not think about politics. He tried too much all at the same time. He was going for too much all at the same time. And as powerful as Germany was, it was only one country. And as amazing as the people are hardworking and all the resources they had, there was a limit. There was a limit somewhere, and they reached it because they tried to do too much too soon for many different reasons. And they spread themselves too thin, and we'll go into other stuff later, but that's my number 5. They made it more about politics than just pure warfare.
I'm raising my hand.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt you because you're on a roll there. Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that, when you talked about, all the resources that went into the moving, the final solution and everything, and we talked about, the waste of, the men and material on the, the Atlantic Wall and the West Wall and that sort of thing. And if I'm not mistaken, the final solution, they were trying to find a most efficient way, unfortunately, to kill people. They came up with Zyklon B, the gas that they could use, because using a bullet for everybody was too many bullets.
Exactly.
And I'm like, wait a second. I mean, that doesn't make, you're sinking all these millions of tons of steel into these fixed fortifications that you could be, like you said earlier, you could be putting into tanks.
Yeah.
And you're concerned now about the bullets it's just, there's a dichotomy going on there that I've always been fascinated with. Like, where's the decision-making going on with this, and what, anyway, I've always found that kind of interesting, like when you sit down and you put pen to paper, these engineers that are sitting there looking at things like these little bean counters, like, well, how can we kill more people and do it cheaply? But let's go sink 1 million cubic meters of concrete on the eastern wall, or the west, on the Atlantic Wall and everything. Yeah, I just find it interesting that it was, that you'd have jobs like that.
Yeah, a lot of them. Well, I found that interesting too, because in order to not devote everything to the war effort, this must have been important to someone. You know what I'm saying? Because you wouldn't just do it if a mid-level manager said, well, instead of just focusing on the war, let's see if we can get rid of all the Jews. No, this came from the top. And so that's why it was a priority. And just to add one more wrinkle to what you said, Ryan, the idea at first was just to eliminate them. But the gentleman who was in charge, I use the word gentleman loosely, the German who was in charge of the Krupp armaments dynasty said, well, he went to Berlin. He goes, well, yeah, we could kill them, or we could work them to death. Yeah. 2 birds, 1 stone. And so that's one of the big reasons that got going as well. But again, it was still a waste, because they were just wasting their time and then killing off the very laborers that they, by the end of the war, they desperately need. So again, a lot of decisions made not in military terms is how you lose a war, because all your enemies are going, hey, what does it take to win? Screw everything else. We're going to do what it takes to win. And they, in some ways, the Third Reich almost tied one hand behind their back. That might be going too far, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have needed all of that. I've read a book on the war economy of Germany during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And by 1943, if they didn't have the tens of millions of laborers and slave laborers, they would have that would have been it. They wouldn't have been able to produce what they would have needed to produce to fight a war on a couple of fronts. But they may not have had that war on a couple of fronts if they hadn't made it such an ideological struggle, like you were saying early on. If they had gone into Western Russia as liberators, as people, it's like, hey, you can grow whatever you want on your farms, and we're not going to starve you, and we're going to make sure that the people that disappeared from your families, that's there's retribution and justice for that.
Mm-hmm.
And there would not have been, they could have, I really believe, in a revisionist history sense, there was a path for the Germans to defeat the Soviet Union during World War II if they weren't so ideological about the way they treated the people that they conquered and occupied, and then a bunch of other things that we're going to talk later that was stupid as well. So, they didn't go in there with the mindset of appeasement, of winning hearts and minds. It was just scorched earth and death, and then people revolted against it.
Absolutely. So I guess in other words, as bad as Stalin was, the Germans out-crueled him.
Yeah.
And so the people went, oh no, Stalin, suddenly we got a much better point of view of this guy.
He's the devil that we know. We're just going to stick with this guy.
Exactly.
You came
That's
in here,
for
we
sure.
thought you're going to be like this angel on our shoulder, and you're just as much of an asshole as he is.
Yeah.
Right. And with the funny mustache. So, but I'm sure we're going to be returning to this subject. I'm suddenly going, but everything in its own time, right? Oh, okay. So that was number 5. I like the diversity there. I'm glad because I do think that everybody should think like me, but I'm glad to see some differences. No, I think that's really good. Who would like to start with number 4?
Well, I think it's my turn. It's my turn.
Go for it, Ryan.
Okay. All right.
I was just going to say my new number 4 is that mustache that he had. If he hadn't had that mustache, then
he would have been.
He would have been a
over.
more lovable person, right?
Yeah.
Like with a mean-looking thing, like
Uncle Adolf. Uncle Adolf.
Totally.
No,
He needed the handlebar mustache. People like that.
oh, and if he could sing in a quartet,
That would be good. A little barbershop.
twirling his meetings and stuff, talking about All right,
we
sorry.
should
Go
help
ahead,
each
Ryan.
other. Sorry.
Okay. I'm going to step back to early in the war, 1940.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the halt order that Hitler gave at Dunkirk was a major blunder. He had the British Expeditionary Force, he had the French troops, he had over 300,000 troops on the run as the German army pushed through France and pushed them all the way to the coast. You've seen the movie Dunkirk, and Hitler actually paused the push and could have annihilated and captured the entire all of those troops.
Mm-hmm.
And instead he stopped for, people say, unknown reasons. Some people think that perhaps it was to garner favor and try to maybe negotiate some sort of a peace or something like that, and and show that he could be magnanimous in a way, like, oh, he's not all bad, But instead, it gave the Allies, it gave Britain, 48 hours to organize Operation Dynamo, which was the actual evacuation across the channel. One of the most Herculean and amazing things that has happened in human history, I think. And that is the evacuation of Dunkirk. The fact that we got over 300,000 men off that beach to fight another day was a big blunder.
The little ships that could. Yeah, it was that's a great one, because a lot of those guys are going to end up in North Africa, keeping that theater open. So that's a very good reason.
And
thanks, Ray.
No, I didn't mean that as condescending.
No, I'm happy. That's genuine. That's genuine.
Plus. Yes.
Ryan's got
a
on
gold
the head.
star.
He's like, oh, I feel good now.
We need gold star emojis from Ray. He needs to give us gold stars.
Good, Ryan.
Sorry, Tony. Go ahead.
No, and it's amplified by the fact that the British never really had a large standing army. They always had these expeditionary forces that could quell whatever sort of colonial thing went down. And if they needed to have an army, they needed time, like they did in World War I, to have a draft and to bring the Kitchener Army together and all that stuff. So it's really outsized. The number of British soldiers that were, rescued on that beach. I'll say something that, maybe some of our audience won't agree with. If those were Americans in 1943 or 1944 that were trapped in that pocket,
Mhm.
and we lost 200,000 or 300,000 men, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
We had 14 to 16 million men in uniform.
Yeah. It'd be
We-
sad, but we'd be
It would have
fine.
said we would have been fine. We could have
Right.
recovered from that.
It would have delayed us, but
Totally.
yeah.
It would have delayed us. We could have recovered from that. But the British could not have afforded to lose the cream of their most highly trained, especially their NCOs that were on that beach that day. That was the core of what would become a much larger army later on. So it would have been an outsized loss, because you could look at some of the battles out east during the Russian campaign and say, shoot, there's some battles where we took 1 million, the Germans took 1 million Russian POWs, and we're talking about 200,000 or 300,000 men on Dunkirk. Whoopee. No,
Right.
no, that was the core of all what Britain needed for the rest of the war on those beaches. So I agree with you. That would have taken probably 2 or 3 years to recover from at best.
Right.
Mhm.
Which they didn't have.
They did not
But,
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what-
it's interesting to because Battle of the Bulge is probably our biggest loss of American soldiers, not only killed but captured.
Mhm.
But that was only about 25 to 30,000 men, and it really we felt that back home because we were grabbing guys and throwing them in. We were grabbing guys that really weren't, that were in their 30s and and 40s to bring in. I have a great uncle that was brought in, was drafted into World War II about that time. He was married and had a family and had his own business, and he
Wow.
was in his 30s, and they needed men bad at
Mhm.
that point,
Yeah.
and so to think, I mean, that number of 25,000 men at the Battle of the Bulge is only about less than 10% of what was captured, of the guys that could have been captured at Dunkirk. So I
Right.
think, I mean, they could have, I think they could have probably easily taken care of Britain when they invaded Britain eventually, if they were chose to do that, because
Right.
they would have had those guys out of the way. So.
Ooh, if I could, I'm sorry, let me just add on this on. And you just made me realize, Ryan, that not only did were they able to bring those guys back, amazing, those guys had no weapons. There was no tanks, there was no trucks, there was no artillery. Some of them had the rifles, but they literally had to leave everything behind and they had to be re-equipped. So adding on to what you said, if the Germans had tried, depending on what the RAF and the Royal Navy could have done to stop it, as far as a land force on Britain, equipped and ready to go,
Nothing.
that would have been quite the challenge. Yeah,
would've been quite
absolutely,
the challenge.
absolutely. So it's and I know you guys know this, but war, just like almost everything else, it's like a spider web. Everything is connected to everything else, either directly or indirectly. And if you affect one area, you're affecting more than just that area. It just depends, and everything's interconnected. And I think that's one of the things that that Hitler was counting on when he threatened to do Operation Sea Lion. But again, it was a very dark moment, which could have been much worse for the British and their allies.
Yeah, I'll even go so far as say as Sea Lion, which for our audience it would have been the invasion of England from Germany. May have been feasible even with may have been feasible with a proper submarine force, with the mines they could have put in the channel, if they had actually eliminated that entire expeditionary force at Dunkirk. The invasion of mainland England may have been feasible.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Okay. But that's what makes World War II. I mean, we're guys and we have testosterone, so we're just going to move past that. But that's what makes it so amazing, because the British held out and they almost lost it here and they almost lost it there, and they held on. And I've said this a billion times. Sometimes you don't have to win; you just have to not lose today. And if you can string enough of those days together, eventually something will break your way.
That's
And
a
for
great
the
point.
British, it did. They just held on. It's romantic. It's inspiring. I know it's war, but it's amazing. And again, we're guys with testosterone, so we think it's pretty cool. So anyways, I'm sorry.
Never say die.
Never. Yeah. Never give up.
All right.
Who?
So my number 4 is the lack of a strategic air force by the Nazi Germans, especially primarily. Well, it would have helped them in the battle for Sea Lion for England. If that had transpired. We just got done talking about the potential for an invasion of England if things went differently in Dunkirk, or if they were diverted by what happened in Russia. And then in Russia proper. So, for example, the distance from Kiev, which is a city that the Germans would have had control of early in the war as they went through Ukraine, to Tankograd behind the Urals, which is one of the main, it's what it's
Tankrad.
called, Chelyabinsk.
Hmm.
Chelyabinsk, I think is the name of it in Russia. That was a huge center for industry where they moved all those factories to this area behind the Urals. Was about 1,300 miles as the crow flies, as airplane
Right.
flies.
Right.
A B-17 bomber has a range of 2,000 miles, so it easily could have done that.
Hmm.
And the superior B-24 bomber, as we met the first time we were talking about the B-17 versus B-24, you guys were the B-17ers, I was a B-24. This just shows the superiority of that aircraft. The
Yeah.
B-24 has a range of 25 to 2,800 miles. So
Amazing.
imagine, because the
Mm.
Germans had the technology, they had the understanding of it. Strategic Air Force was something that was relatively new in World War II, but it wasn't like foreign to people.
Yeah.
Imagine what Germany could have done in 1942 or 41 if they had 500 B-17 type bombers and could just bomb the holy hell out of all those factories. They had air superiority at that time.
Hmm.
They could have flown over the Urals, bombed those factories, and really prevented this flood tide of equipment. They could have used those bombers to bomb the convoys from the British coming up through up north by Finland and
Hmm.
feeding the arteries there. So I just thought that that was, it's lower on my list, but
Right.
it's one of these things that if the Germans had this capability and they could have had the resources, they could have had the something that was doable. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they should
Absolutely.
have built an intercontinental ballistic missile in 1939. I'm saying something they could have done that
Yeah.
could have helped them with England and also Russia. So that
Yeah.
that is my number 4.
No, that's a good point because if I can tag that on to something that I said earlier, the Germans had a certain mentality about the way war should be conducted based on what happened to them in World War One, good and bad. So Blitzkrieg, that we have limited means and we have limited time before everybody gangs up on us. So they need lightning warfare. What they need is a knockout punch.
Yep. Yep.
It worked
Yeah.
on France. It worked on Luxembourg, Belgium, Norway. So this was certainly effective. So the reason they didn't build those planes, which would have been such a huge advantage to them, was because they were focused on the enemy right in front of them. Oh, does this particular plane support the troops? Then we're not going to do it. But you're right. But it's the job of a leader to have a vision. I need to be able to step outside of my previous experiences in World War One. So Blitzkrieg has worked is good, but what could be better? A long range Air Force, long range bombers. They would have had more options open to them. They didn't do it because of their narrow view, and they pay the price for it. Whereas we're Americans. We think big. We think
Right.
over the mountains and over the seas, and the
Yep.
plane could be bigger and it can go further. But that's just our mentality for whatever reason. That's the
Uh,
average American mentality.
You raise a good point about mentality, right? Philosophy. The American philosophy among some people in U.S. Army Air Corps was you didn't even need a standing army. You
Yeah,
just
you
go
just
over there
bombed it.
and just bomb them. And this
Yeah,
was a
Yeah.
very popular idea
Yep.
in Europe, post-war Europe, in the 1920s and 30s,
yeah,
with countries like Italy, with countries like the United States, Great Britain, where the idea was, hey, we don't need to have 1 million men in uniform. If you go and you bomb all their cities and they
right.
can't make war and their morale is defeated, then there
Yeah,
is no war.
yeah,
And so it is interesting. Now, it turns out that neither one of those are true. It turns out that just having a tactical Air Force that just thinks of what's going to ground is a bad idea. You should have a strategic Air Force, but you can't just have a strategic Air Force too. Like that didn't
exactly.
exactly win the war for the United States. It was an element of it. But I guess when I was putting this list together, I was trying to think of, so higher in my list are the things that Germany shouldn't have done at all. And lower in
Right.
the list is okay, but they did it. Now what could have helped them? And I think that, that was one of the things that potentially could have helped.
Absolutely. And again, um, adding on to those. So what I did was I took a look at what Hitler got right early on. Is like when he there was a different plan to invade France than the one that they ended up using, and someone else comes to him and they bring a different plan because they were just going to do the same thing they did in World War One. They were just going to swing to the right, touch the coast, come down and hit Paris. This other guy, I think it was the chief of staff, I can't remember, brings a plan to Hitler. Let's go left. I mean, they won't see it coming. It's right over the Ardennes. The point is, Hitler did have good instincts. Eventually, he goes insane because he can't stand losing. That's a whole nother
Right.
thing. But then his mistakes become really, really big. And for what my number 4 is, it's when he starts micromanaging the military when things don't go well, and he starts saying, stand here, stand fast, don't fall back, stand there and die for the glory of whatever. So I just wanted to give a couple of examples of this, and most of these everybody will know. But again, they end up losing over 1 million men, and Germany is not America. Germany is not Soviet Russia. If they lose 1 million men, they're going to feel it. You know what I'm saying? So, and I don't mean that in a cruel way. It's just numbers at some point.
Numbers. Yeah.
So anyway, the big one that everybody knows is Stalingrad. So late 1942, early 1943, 43, General Paulus, the Sixth Army, is told to take Stalingrad to protect forces, to protect forces going south, trying to get to the oil fields of Tbilisi, things like that. So anyways, General Paulus starts out with 300,000 men. The Russians just won't quit coming at them. Don't get me wrong, they're losing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and I think over 1 million people, but they just don't stop coming, and Paulus's forces being ground down. So eventually Paulus is like, hey boss, I think we should fight our way out of here. We tried it, it's not working, let's fight our way west. I'm probably going to lose half my guys, but 150,000 is better than if we all die here today. And Hitler's like, nope, stay there because you're doing a good thing, and I've got my own reasons. Don't worry, I'll supply you from the air. Yeah, you're going to supply 300,000 guys from the air. Sure, it doesn't happen. If they had broken out, let's just say 150,000 men had gotten out. That's not bad, but of the 300,000 troops that Paulus started with, by the time he surrenders to the Soviets, he's got like 90,000 men. The rest are dead. And of those 90, and I know you probably know this already, of those 90,000 men who were captured and taken into captivity, only about 5,000 of them made it home after the war.
Oh my
the
gosh.
Soviets do not play. They do not play. And it was a war to the death, right? Because that's the tone that the Germans set. So anyway, so there's Stalingrad. Then there's the Rzhev salient. Just think west of Moscow. So Operation Barbarossa comes along. They get close to Moscow. They don't make it. They get pushed back a little bit. So you've got a line, 100 miles. I can't remember, 80, let's just say 100 miles or whatever from Moscow. So the threat is still there. So but the generals, that army group center is being hammered in the middle of winter. 41, 42. And the German generals say to Hitler, hey, let us fall back a little bit. We can straighten out the line. Yep. We'll actually make the line shorter. Let's bring in some more supplies. And Hitler's like, nope, stay right where you are. So the Russians are like, if you're going to stand there, I'm going to attack you. And by the time it's all over with, the Germans lost hundreds of thousands of troops. The Russians lost millions. In fact, they hid this secret for decades. But like Tony was saying, they could afford to lose 1 million men and keep on fighting, and they did. Battle of I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to jump in just really quick here. A couple of these examples you're talking about also have to do with him being an ideologue. It's almost like he needed to out Stalin. Like,
yes,
hey, they're staying there. They're not leaving. They're a thorn in our side. We can do the same thing.
Right.
But please continue. Please continue.
If they back up, then if they retreat, if they pull back, then that's going to be a propaganda coup for the Soviets. Right. And so Hitler would never give them any quarter like that. So
well, it's almost like a pissing contest, but you're dealing with men's lives. It's like, because and this is not going to make any sense to anybody listening to this today, but Mussolini and Hitler literally had the mentality about, well, if we have a fascist government, it is their de facto superior to the communist, because it's fascist, because it's of the facets of being fascist. So our soldiers, by extrapolation, therefore, are superior as well. So if we hold, it's tough, but we're willing to lose men. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves because we have this. I mean, it was just this whole mindset.
Yep.
It was like the world's worst cult to be a member of because there was a good chance you were going to die and freeze to death. So I mean, you know what I'm saying.
It was like Heaven's Gate, but in winter with guns shooting at
Yeah,
you.
yeah, don't, yeah. And if they ever have to draft us three, then you know the war's lost. Don't even.
You got people like Ray or Tony holding a rifle. It's like, oh shit.
Which end? Oh no,
We
don't
need
do
a
that.
peace
Okay.
agreement here. We need a ceasefire. All right, sorry, Ray. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Wait,
You were
okay,
talking
We
about
need
Kirk.
3 guys with graying beards to join our army, please.
Yeah, we still wouldn't volunteer because we know better. Yeah, no. I can be the cook, but that's as far as it goes. So there's the Rzhev salient, and then and everybody knows of this one, the Battle of Kursk. So it's 1943. The Germans, there's some German officers who are like, look, we're not going to win. Let's just see what we can do. Let's see if we can live through this, but we're not going to win. So what it is the Germans are going to take 2 large tank forces and they're going to do a pincer movement. They're going to cut off a little section of the front and try to kill all the Russians. And, pretty standard stuff. But if you can pull it off and take out 1 million Soviet soldiers, that's something. It doesn't work. They don't get very far. In fact, after the Soviets stop them, they then counterattack themselves. The Germans lose at least 200,000 troops because in the middle of this, there are 2 cities that the pincers came from. And the German generals are like, we got to get out of here. And Hitler's like, nope, you're not going to back up from those cities. Those cities are important. It would make us look bad. And there are political reasons that you don't understand because you're just a general and I'm the top dog. And they're like, okay, we'll stay. And they lose a minimum of 200,000 troops. Around Leningrad, they weren't allowed to pull back as clearly the war was being lost in Leningrad. So there's like 250,000 troops that get caught in one of the Baltic countries. They want to fight their way south, join Army Group. They want to fight their way south and join Army Group Center, double the numbers. Hitler's like, nope, stay where you're at because there's political reasons and symbolic reasons that you can't understand. But trust me, I know what I'm talking about here. Not only are they pinned in, I mean, fortunately, they're not all destroyed because they are human beings after all. But what it is the Soviets have so many forces, they're able to pin them against the coast and just send other armies under them right into Germany. That made no difference whatsoever. It would have been better if they had been allowed, but it would, make fascists look bad? I don't know, but it just doesn't make any sense. And there's other ones we don't have to go into. There's the D-Day operation where 50,000 German troops are trapped. They want to fall back across the Seine. Hitler says no. There's Operation Bagration, 1944, a huge one. There's going to be 300,000 German casualties, Axis casualties at this one because Hitler said, stand your ground. And they did because they swore an oath to him personally, not to Germany, not to the Nazi state, but to Hitler personally. And this was 1940s. They took this oath very seriously, whereas I would have been like, I'm out of here. But again, it's mistakes like this that cost him over 1 million men that he desperately could have needed. Sometimes you need to reign and not rule as the leader, but he got so involved in every little thing, it backfired.
I mean, he got caught up in his own image.
Yeah,
and
drank his own Kool-Aid.
he didn't know when to cut his losses and preserve his what assets that he had, and it was the men and the material that ended up suffering and hastening the end. Probably a faster end of the war because of that. Because of how he would throw in and tell all the guys to hold back.
Yeah.
I mean. So, yeah,
well,
I agree. That's interesting.
It is. And this fortress mentality that he developed because he's an ideologue fighting in the East against the Untermensch, who actually could do these little fortress things because they had more manpower and they were psychotic.
Right.
It would have impacts on the West with the United States and the Allies. There were a number of times where the Germans applied that idea in the Ardennes, in Metz, in Aachen. And it would wreck them there too. The Germans would end up sticking their neck out and having these forces in places where they shouldn't be, and the Americans were able to take advantage of that. And that pocket that you're talking about up by the Baltics, I can't remember if it was Kolya or Kolmar pocket.
Courland,
that's it.
Courland.
There to this day, there is a Russian state in Kaliningrad that exists to this day. That is an annexed Soviet state. That's the remnant of that
Right.
pocket that after World War II and the rise of the Iron Curtain, the Soviets never left, and they're there to this day with their weapons right there on the Baltic coast, just north of
Yeah.
Poland.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've seen some very, I'm just going to use the word beautiful, beautiful monuments in, pictures. I haven't been there in Russia about, the Great Patriotic War. And they have every right to be, proud because they tore the guts out of the Germans when it looked like nobody else could. But yeah, I'm not surprised because they're going to remember a victory, of that kind. And it should be remembered because they were standing up against something horrible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally. Totally.
Okay, so that's number 4. Number 3, who would like to go first?
That's Rhino. Go ahead and bring it.
All right. So essentially, this kind of dovetails with what we were just talking about. It seems like to me that, about the time that the Battle of Britain, Dunkirk happens, the Battle of Britain happens, Hitler's rolling, and he doesn't know who to attack. He's like, I could take Britain. You know what?
Yeah.
I think I want to take Russia. So, I think, at that time period, he decided he was infallible and he was going to attack. He lets go of Britain. He tries Britain. He should have finished Britain off, really. Again, the whole issue with Dunkirk and everything. But I think that his ADD, I will say, with knowing which direction to go, and then bringing on essentially a 3-front war eventually, with attacking Russia, and not finishing off the battle, not finishing off Britain, and allowing that essential, like an aircraft, a fixed aircraft carrier sitting off the coast of Europe for all of us all the Americans to gather to. I think was he just made a mess of things at that point with his vision.
So you're talking like a lack of strategic vision.
But I mean, and not finishing things, I mean, and I'm going to attack Russia. Don't worry about Britain. We can't seem to break their air force.
We'll go to North Africa and help the Italians for a while.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. You're right. I mean, with the having the Italians as your ally, was that really a good thing? I don't think so.
Not really.
They kind of got dragged into a few a few instances where they had to bail them out. So anyway, I'll just say that I think that Hitler's lack of vision and being pulled in all directions, thinking he was infallible, was one of the major blunders.
Yeah. Right. So hubris and ideology, being an ideologue, lack of focus, lack of execution, having an exit strategy. Yeah.
What was he looking at me for? I don't know. No, go ahead. No, sorry.
Yeah, Ray's just doing stuff, man. He doesn't know. I'm just doing stuff today.
Ray's like, is it dinner time yet? Is my burger ready?
We're not having burgers, Ray. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
I want a Taco Bell. Screw you guys.
Ray wants a burger. Don't make Ray angry. No, sorry. Go ahead, Tony. I apologize.
Oh no, I don't. So my number 3 feeds into my number 2 and my number 1. Okay. And so my number 3, so it needs a little bit of a history reminder before I get to it. So, in 1939, 1938, you had Germany reoccupied the lands that were ceded to France during World War I. Didn't fire a shot. And then they went into Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland. And that's where, Chamberlain, the British, premier or prime minister, said, we have peace in our time because we have given up a piece of a sovereign nation to Germany, and that means they're not going to want anything else. They've reconstituted everything
they promised
they had before. Totally. Yeah, and then in August of 1939, they signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which basically protects them from the Russian bear. And it actually was working. I mean, Stalin had, when we looked at the archives at the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989, Stalin had no idea, no desire to attack Germany. All of the agreed upon trade things that were occurring, Stalin was adhering to the letter. He was providing oil and steel and coal and aluminum and titanium and all the stuff they needed for the war effort, right? Yeah. So, and then in 1939, in September, they invade Poland and they dice it up. And so here you are, Germany, You're on
Yeah.
top of the world, which kind of goes back to the previous thing. You've defined this big empire now in Europe, and then you go and defeat France.
Yeah. It
You've
doesn't
got
get any
Europe.
better. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
better. And then what do you do? Or I should say, right before you invade France, what do you do? Germany signs the tripartite pact with Italy and Japan.
Yeah.
Now, on the surface, a lot of people would say, Tony, why would that rank number 3? It was kind of a meh sort of deal. And
Right.
that's exactly my point. It made no strategic sense because Japan was over in a completely different theater of operation than what Italy and Germany were doing. So there's thing number 1. There was no way to really coordinate things. 2, Japan was already leery of Germany. For people who don't know, Japan and Russia have been fighting this proxy war for a decade before World War II started. And now Germany, who had Japan, who visited Japan and Japan visited Germany, had all these diplomatic relations as a couple of basically fascist states. Now, all of a sudden, they align with the evil empire, which made Japan a little eh. And the entire idea from my research, and this agreement got signed in September 27th, 1940, was to cow the United States. The idea was, if you have this tripartite pact with Japan in the Pacific and us in Italy in Europe, you'll know better and you'll stay away. And it had the complete opposite effect. It allowed Americans who have historically at this time had been very isolationist. It immediately created what would later be known by more recent generations as an axis of evil, as something that it formalized, it crystallized good and bad. These are the bad guys. Look at them signing this pact. Look at the stuff that they're doing. And it would lead to Germany doing some really stupid things in 1941 that may not have happened if this pact hadn't been signed. So this little known weak pact, the reason I put it in here is it had no strategic importance. It helped no one involved. It was designed to cow the United States, and instead it emboldened them. It was one of the factors that forced FDR to have things like the peacetime draft and to start building up our military is when he saw stuff like this going down. So I thought it was mistake number 3 because it primed the pump for my mistake number 2.
Right. Yeah, because it literally gives FDR in a way, not like Pearl Harbor, but it gives FDR in a way a kind of smaller blank check. Look, we're being threatened from all around. We gotta, I know you don't want to gear up for war. I don't want to gear up for war, but we gotta gear up for war. I mean, and it's good, it creates jobs. But the point is, but here's the part that I like about what you said, Tony, because only a person like Hitler, who would not just wage war, but try to do a bunch of political things during the war and therefore wasting a lot of resources, would think, only someone like that would think that, well, let's all sign, let me get with 2 other countries. Let's sign basically a meaningless pact, and that'll be enough to intimidate the Americans. Hello, have you not met an American? He should have got an American experience. No, they're fine until you piss them off. The Americans, and we're not perfect. Please don't. I'm not America for a step, but we do have a strong sense. I'm not saying it's perfect. We do have a strong sense of fair play and fair dealings, and like it's and this is replete in our sporting world. But if you do something that we consider not fair play, it's like I haven't done anything to you, and now you've got this pact against me. You know,
Totally.
it's like walking into New York and going, your mama is so fat because you're about to die, but it feeds into what helped FDR and tying in something that Ryan said earlier, when Hitler's making mistakes, I think it's important to remember, maybe not the people around him, but I think he himself could not imagine anything but eventual victory. Yes, I just lost 100,000 guys, but when we win 5 years from now, that'll be just one of the more amazing moments of our victory. I don't think he could see anything else. And so he would make these mistakes thinking, oh, it's all going to work out in the end. Whereas the generals are like, and I think Ryan might have said something like this, or no. The tanks and the guns and the guys and the planes, that's how we win. We don't win because we're fascists. We win because they're good at what they do. Yep. And if we start losing them, it's all irrelevant. So, I like that very much, Tony, because political gestures don't mean if you're just a guy in the trench with a gun, you got your buddies or whatever. Politics very quickly, as far as the man in the trenches leaves the area. That's for the leaders. And so a useless gesture like that is a useless, and as we're going to see when I'm sure this is going to come up, we're going to see a little later how useless this was when other shit happened. So we'll get to that in a
and
second.
how it acted as a catalyst for other things. I would one other thing. They say history repeats itself. You can learn from history and all that. That tripartite pact reminded me of the Xi Jinping Chinese and the Putin no holds bar friendship pact. When I saw that being announced on TV 4 or 5 years ago, I thought to myself, okay, you guys made the same mistake that the Germans did, because up until that point, I would argue that enough Americans felt like China was just a country that would eventually become more democratic. The more they started trading with us and the more little trinkets and crap we bought from their economy. I think most people weren't really super anti-China. They were leery. We saw them as a rival, but not as an enemy.
Right.
And with Russia, this is pre-Ukrainian war invasion and all that. I think we saw Russia as kind of a diminished bear that's clinging on to its history, but not a big threat to us. Look at what Europe was doing with all the trades. When they signed and came out and that agreement and said, this is an unconditional love between the two of us. We want a new world order. We want to reduce the reliance on the dollar. That is when I felt like you could start to see a change in the tone of the papers, the United States and Europe, like, okay, it's on. This is no longer a rivalry. You are an enemy of the United States. And look what's happened since that deal has been announced. Look at all the things that have occurred. It's very World War II-ish in terms of being a belligerent, thinking you can cow the United States. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to blow back on them in the same way it blew back on Germany and Italy and Japan in 1940. That's my prediction.
That reminds me, because you're right. We do, if you pay attention, we can learn stuff from history. And I think America's gotten to the point where if we are united people, it would take an awfully lot. It'd take a lot of countries working together to bring us down. Instead, what people are doing is getting us to tear ourselves apart, which is a whole nother conversation. But that's how you defeat someone more powerful than you. You can't take them on directly. You get them to fight amongst themselves. But again, a united America, I would not want to mess with a united America. But unfortunately, in some ways, adding on to what you're saying, Tony, we're not united. And would it take another Pearl Harbor? I have no idea. But that's a tough one. But I always think that if aliens came to this country and said, we're going to kick everybody's ass, and all the Earthlings got together, we'd be an unstoppable force. At least that's what Hollywood has taught me. So
we've seen it over and over again.
I've seen War of the Worlds.
But no,
exactly.
I look at the United States as twin brothers who fight all the time until a third person comes and punches one of his twin brothers in the mouth, and then the two twin brothers gang up and beat the shit out of the other guy. Yeah. That's how I see the United States.
As I used to say to my brother, nobody hits my brother but me.
Exactly.
That kind of.
And then they gang up on the one guy, and the guy's like, "What's going on? I thought you hated each other."
Yeah, we did up until about 30 seconds.
Until you did that, and now we hate you.
Exactly. Well, I think my number 3 is very close to Ryan's, because I put from my number 3, actually, and you mentioned this too, Tony, so I think we all agree, failing to defeat Britain. So France falls, and I think you both made excellent points. I think Hitler is like, oh my, I can't win for losing. Oh my God, I'm amazing. Because France and Germany had a rivalry going on for decades, if not hundreds of years. And suddenly Germany's biggest rival, and enemy might be too strong, I don't know, but rival has been defeated by them in 6 weeks. This is Hitler's high water mark. This is it. It cannot get any better for him. And he can't quite get to Britain because of the British Channel. He kind of respects them. He doesn't want to fight. He just wants them to agree, look, Europe is mine. Yeah. And Britain, you keep your colonies all over the world, but you just, and Churchill's like, so that's not going to happen. So you're right. Hitler said to his generals, Britain is counting on Russia. If I can take Russia out, the Americans aren't involved yet because he doesn't have any idea that Pearl Harbor is coming. If I can take out Russia, Britain will have no one to turn to, and then they will have to come to the negotiating table. So I'm going to take out Russia to get Britain to talk to me. Okay, but because Britain does not, they survive, the Battle of Britain. So by the time the Battle of Britain is over, the Germans will lose 2,585 air crewmen. You know how long it takes to train crewmen. I mean, these guys are professionals. It costs the state tons of time, tons of money. They have another 925 crewmen captured because they were shot down, but they survived. They will lose just under 2,000 planes, the Germans, all kinds. And so when they do go into Russia, they are that much weaker in their air arm. So again, everything's connected to everything else. And I think it was Ryan, I can't remember, that said, because Britain stays in the war, just the fact that they're in the war, we're about to ship a shit ton of American soldiers over to the UK to eventually do D-Day, but at first was it the 8th Army Air Force gets over there first, and they join the bombing. So again, just the fact that they're in the war alone, forget North Africa for a second, forget Mediterranean, they're an unsinkable carrier, like you said, and success builds on itself, much like failure builds on itself.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm just going to jump in and say, you know, we had the Lend-Lease Act, you know, where we were staying out of it, but hey, how about we send you Jeeps and ammo and equipment? You know, if Hitler would have followed through with Britain and just held off on Russia and followed through on Britain and taken that out, I mean, he knew that we were supplying Britain. He knew that we were supplying them with minimum material, or not minimum, but material. That would have stopped, that whole threat, to remove that. Because where are we going to stage from if America gets in the war?
Yeah, we were freaking out thinking about that, because if we were looking at Africa, and that's just too far away. That would have been
that was a gigantic aircraft carrier for the United States.
Yes,
to plan and, like I said, stage from to be able to launch across the channel. So
and let's have a little fun with this. Let's play a little counterfactual history. France has fallen. What would have happened if Hitler said, all this, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is doing great. They're supplying me all the oil and precious metals I need. Wheat, food, all of it, grain. We're good to go. What if they had those 200 U-boats? What if they had 1,000? Well, they didn't even need strategic bombers for Britain. It was, they could bomb 70% of it with what they had.
Yeah.
What if they had the ability? I mean, you got to remember, early in the war, the British were having some of their best battleships sunk in Scapa Flow by German U-boats.
Yeah.
I mean, what if the U-boats were able to cordon off the English Channel long enough to be able to have an invasion force go over there? You've got them in a weakened state.
Yes.
They've already lost most of their expeditionary force and their equipment on the sands of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the Germans were early adopters of paratroops, and they used them very skillfully during the war, the Fallschirmjäger. That's another element that they could have had over. And another thing to keep in mind is when the Battle of Britain occurred, maybe another mistake, if you guys hadn't said it yet, that should be mentioned, is Germans should have continued to focus on the radar systems and the Royal Air Force. Because the minute they got pissed off that one of the German cities got bombed and they went into London and Liverpool and all started bombing those, that gave the RAF a respite. What if they didn't do that? They could have suppressed the Navy, suppressed their Air Force. They had more than enough troops and equipment to get over there. There is, I think, a counterfactual historical credence to be made to being able to take Britain out of the war through their home island.
Right. There's a path if enough things had lined up. So one, they were bombing their radar towers, but the towers, and these are very basic structures, they would be up before the day was out. And you make a good point. When they started bombing the landing fields that the British planes were used, they're like, we're screwed. We can't take off. We can't land. It's not safe. That was really, really hurting the RAF. But yeah, when they start bombing the city, I mean, and not to be cruel, but the RAF pilots kind of went, thank God they're bombing. Yeah, thank God they're bombing the cities, because it's going to let us do our job. And between that and the radar, it allowed the British planes, the RAF, to attack surgically, like with a scalpel, whereas the Germans were more like a broadsword. But when you have radar, you know exactly what's coming, when it's coming, how many you want to send. I mean, it's just brilliant. It's like 3D chess, if you will. But George, so if you've taken away the British Army, 300,000 of them got back, but they don't have any weapons. If you can get enough of your U-boats to just literally just make a tunnel all under the water of U-boats protecting your ships. I mean, it would have been ugly. Don't get me wrong, but they could have landed some troops. The question is, it's not getting troops across the first
It's
time.
maintaining the supplies.
It's maintaining
Exactly.
it. You're right.
So that's a whole nother, I don't know about that, but I'm just saying they could have caused some serious ass damage. But, and even today, I do a thing called Today in World War II. Today, September 17th, I think it was 1940, where the British had bombed a bunch of they had like 1,200 barges. I think it was 1,200 barges and 200 larger ships in the various French ports in northern the north coast of France, which could carry roughly 500,000 men.
Yeah.
Now, not all 500,000 would have made it, but let's say 200, 300,000 against an army that is not well equipped. It would have been ugly. It would have been ugly for the British. Again, thank goodness that didn't happen. Yeah. But I don't know. I think Hitler's like, oh, it's and this goes back to something Ryan said. Look, if it's not happening fast enough, either I lose interest or I see what I want to see, and I really hate the Russians. And we all know I'm going after the Russians, right? We all. I said it in my book, and I think he just got not so much bored that's going too far, right? But I think he's like, yeah, okay. He starts looking at Russia, and he justifies it, going, if I take them out, the British will have to talk to me. So two birds, one stone. And of course that leads to another thing. But again, we didn't even mention North Africa, the Mediterranean, British special operations, the Battle of the Atlantic, Britain being a home base for D-Day. So again, the fact that Britain is still in the war is a big one for eventually so much more happening that Germany can't win the war.
Agreed. 100%. Agreed.
So who would like to do number 2?
Rhino?
All right. So, this kind of all dovetails as you're talking about. A lot of these things
I think
are all related to each other,
Exactly.
And I'm going to say, Germany's underestimation of the arsenal of democracy.
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
that's close to my number 2, a little different take, but please continue.
So what I'm going to say is, as we were just talking about, Germany invades Russia in 1941. At this time in the war, when Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, it's December of 41. Hitler thinks he's almost got Soviet Union beat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on December 11th, 1941, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States. We didn't declare war on them. They declared war on us. And that same day, we threw them on the ground and said, all right, you want to go? Let's go. So therefore, all bets are off. Now we're in it to win it. Okay.
Exactly.
And people ask, they think, well, why would Hitler have done that? And I think part of it was he had confidence in victory because of Soviet Union. And he felt like the arsenal of democracy, to him, America was just that. These guys aren't fighters. Oh, they came in World War I late.
They're soft.
They were in the war for what, less than a year.
Yeah.
And we don't know anything about these guys. Really, they're going through a depression. I don't know about this. We can take these guys. I'm not worried about it.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the big things. And obviously it was overwhelming. And by not defeating Britain, it brought the whole weight of the world on top of Hitler, I think.
Absolutely.
So we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because mine's similar to Ryan, and then we can amplify it a little bit.
Yeah.
So mine was the same way. My number 2 was Hitler declaring war on the United States on December 11th of 1941. Several days after Pearl Harbor. And why did he do it? He felt like this is where the tripartite pact could have teeth.
That's
Japan,
right. Solidarity.
Exactly. Solidarity. He saw Japan by December 11th. Japan went on that huge Pacific blitzkrieg.
Yeah.
And the German military was still very much in control of the European continent. And so, and you're right, Ryan, he thought, he was quoted as saying something, America's great at making refrigerators, but not good at making airplanes. So he didn't have any respect for us at all. And it would come back to bite him. So that tripartite pact, this idea that he had to cow the United States to do that, ultimately forced the United States a year before the attack on Pearl Harbor to start preparing for war which allowed them to be a little better prepared than they would have been, but definitely momentum was creating. And here's some of the material stuff that ended up biting him that the United States did. I get this from this book, John Ellis, The
I love John Ellis.
Encyclopedia of Fact and Figures. I know a lot of people like Ray and Stephen Ambrose quote from it. And here's some of the stuff. Here's the can of whoop ass he opened. Crude oil. That's a pretty important thing to have if you're going to fight in a modern war in the 20th century. The United States, during the course of the war, produced 833 metric tons of oil. The USSR, UK, Canada, Germany, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Japan, basically all the remaining Axis and our allies only produced a third of that at 276 million metric tons.
Wow.
We literally produced 3 times more oil than the rest of the industrial belligerent powers combined.
Jeez.
That's oil.
That's
great.
oil.
That's a great
big oil.
fact.
That's big oil.
That is
big
big
oil.
oil. There you go. Let's go to steel. The United States during the course of the war produced 334.5 million metric tons. That is equivalent to all of the rest of the belligerents and the allies, USSR, UK, Canada, Germany, Italy, Hungary, Romania. They produced about the same amount of steel together as just the United States did alone. And then aluminum, 4.123 million metric tons. That was 25% more aluminum that was produced by all the belligerents. We put 16 million men in uniform. We produced over 324,000 airplanes. That's 100,000 more airplanes than the entire Axis powers, all of them combined.
Jeez. Yeah.
And here's the stat that blows me away the most. We had active by September of 1945, 6,788 ships that were active. This included 100 aircraft carriers, 23 battleships,
Oh my
232 subs. We had 2,547 assault boats. This is a fact. The United States Navy at the end of World War II had more ships, more men, and was more powerful than all of the navies in the world combined.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what German did when they said, hey, they make good refrigerators. Let's go ahead and declare war on them 5 days after December 7th. And I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
These facts you can look up. How long, when my understanding from the veterans that we've interviewed, Ryan and I, and from the books we've read, is when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, it was really easy to hate the Japanese. And the Japanese were Oriental. There's a lot of racism involved. But there really still wasn't as huge of a hatred or push to hate Germans. How long would the United States have waited to declare war or join the war if Germany had never declared war on us?
Ooh.
Right.
When
That's a good point.
would we have been more Euro-centric in our, or I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
Good
So
question.
the bottom
Okay,
line
yeah.
is so Germany declared, a lot of people think that when we were attacked by Japan in Pearl Harbor, that we declared war on Japan and Germany. No, we
No.
declared war on Japan. We never declared war on Germany. The Germans did on us, right?
Yeah.
Well, they started it, but we redeclared the same day back on them.
Yeah.
Right. But my point is they declared war on us. My
Yes,
question
exactly.
to you guys is, hypothetically, if Germany had never declared war on us, how would we have gotten into that war? When would
Right.
we have declared war on them? When would we have joined?
Yeah. It probably, well, the excuse, let's be honest, because I'm sure FDR would have been looking for excuse. The excuse would have been wrapped around somewhere the Battle of the Atlantic, sinking American ships, because
Yep.
we were, whatever.
I would think so too.
Can I just add something real quick? And I'm sure you probably read this as well, and I'm just beating you to the punch. Sorry. When Pearl Harbor happened, Hitler was out east having a meeting with someone. He rushed back to Berlin, called the Reichstag into session on December 11th, and declared war because he says, Ribbentrop, I think it was Ribbentrop, says, a great power does not allow itself to be declared war upon, it declares war on others. So this schmuck with a schmucky mustache goes, oh, I'm missing out. The spotlight's not on me. He rushes back to Berlin, says a bunch of degrading things about American, and then declares war on us. But I wanted to add on, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Tony, but I wanted to add on. So let's say for a second that Germany doesn't declare war on us. It's just, Pearl Harbor, Japan. Yep. Now, as you know, America was roughly, if it wasn't 50% split between isolationist and interventionist, it was pretty close. It was
Yes.
pretty close.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor comes along,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
gone.
What a
More than
galvanizing
gone.
moment.
More whatever's more than gone, that's what it is.
Right.
Now, so the point is America's going to gear up for war. We're in it to win it. We're going to do, but having Germany declare a war on us when we're like, where did that come from?
Yep.
So whatever the American, and let's be honest, whether it's racism, just the thought of revenge, or anger and whatever, all of that, I've got to think increases even more with the German declaration of war on us because, you both want to play?
Exactly.
Okay.
You
Okay,
both
but-
just punched my twin brother.
Exactly.
Now we're gonna kick
That's
your
right.
ass.
Yeah. And then you kick my sister. So,
Yes.
but it's just, I think it gives the Americans even more urgency. So they're not going to see new cars for years. They're not going to see a lot of new tires for
Right.
years, but they're like, whatever it fucking takes.
Yeah.
Whatever. And they
Because
did. So
we could
yeah.
sit there and take higher ground, and you can debate whether or not we made Japan have to attack us and all that crap. But at the end of the day, for the average American at that time, from the people we've spoken to who lived through it, they felt like, hey, man, we were just going to movies and trying to come out of the Great Depression, and these assholes attacked us and declared war on us, and we weren't having any of that. And
Right.
this was going to end our way, not their way.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was just going to say one thing I was going to ask. So, Tony, how many ships did you say that we generated with the U.S. Navy during World War II?
6,788.
And today, the U.S. Navy has a little less than 500.
Right. Yeah. And it's still the biggest Navy in the world by far.
It's amazing. And I go back to the Hitler not taking Britain, and you think, well, it was probably a logistics thing to go across that channel, all that kind of stuff. But yet, what were we doing? We were sending all
Across
of
the
our stuff
ocean.
across
I
half a
know.
world away.
Yeah.
Supplying.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it can be done.
I really think England, allowing England to exist, was probably one of the biggest, like top 3 blunders.
He should have tried, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad he did, but he should have. I mean, where's the effort? Where's the chutzpah? He didn't even. It's not like he tried any.
Come on, Adolf.
Yeah, come on. Don't
Where's
play
your
for a
cojones?
tie.
Better than that.
This
No,
isn't a
no.
soccer match. This is a baseball game. We're going to extra innings, dude. This stuff's
That's right.
endings. One of us is winning and one's losing.
Whatever it takes, exactly. Because the winner is going to McDonald's, motherfucker. No, but you remind me of something. I meant to look this up and I forgot. But we produce so many ships of various kinds: carriers, cruisers, battleships. We produce so many ships. We literally had to go, what the fuck should we call this one? We came up with Casablanca. We came up with Franklin. What was the island that MacArthur was on? Corregidor. I mean, we named these ships.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were drawing them out of hat, but they literally, I think they probably had to quit making ships because they quit coming up with names. It was that bad.
It was so bad. We started naming our ships after ships that the Japanese had sunk a year earlier.
That's right,
in the same war, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's like,
I
well, they
thought we
sank the
got that
Hornet. We're running out of names. Let's call this one the Hornet.
Yep.
2.0, motherfucker. No.
Here comes
No,
the
but
Essex
that's true.
class right up
It
your
was
ass
true.
with 100
Yeah.
with 100 Hellcats,
yeah.
man.
And then if somebody was to ask why, because we can.
Amen.
That's why we did. Yeah. So
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say that's something is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but it's one of the things I think that's the hallmark of the arsenal of democracy. We kept developing and refining our aircraft and our fighters and our bombers all throughout the war.
Yeah.
And our tanks, we kind of should have developed our tanks better, but we went from we had the B-29 that came along after the B-17 and the inferior B-24, and anyway. But like Japan, for instance, they had a static air force. The Zero is our fighter. Doesn't matter if you throw a rock at us and our plane explodes.
Exactly.
That's our fighter. Germany had the Focke-Wulf and had the Messerschmitt, and I was just surprised. We had all the time and material to keep refining our war machine and getting better and better at it. Now, you could argue that Hitler was doing the same thing with his high-tech weapons. And that's probably going to lead into my next one after this.
That's a whole nother level as far as what the Americans were doing with improving we just tinker. We're Americans. We just like, well, what if it could? What if I did that?
Yeah.
You know, whatever. That's just our mentality.
Let's put a
put
rocket
two-
on this.
Let's
Yeah.
put 2 levels of rotary engines on this, like a
Right.
double
That's
wasp,
right.
not
Yeah.
a single wasp, but double.
Yeah.
It's
So
better.
So I don't even. Oh my God, we've been at this so long. I don't even know if I gave my number 2. But
No,
my
it's
number-
your turn. You're number
Oh,
2.
My number 2.
we
pretty much-
we know you're number 2. You know,
Yeah, we know
you're
this.
number 2. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
I
I'm.
don't-
That's
I don't know where
Invasion
this-
of Sicily.
It's a pee pee and poo poo joke.
No, it's the Germany declaring war on the United States
Oh,
when it didn't have to. So
Yes.
look
again,
at this.
Yes.
yeah. So
See?
so the whole thing.
You and
It's a
me.
trifecta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the stars are aligning. So basically, and I'll just do this real quick because we've pretty much covered it. So Barbarossa comes along, and again, it was supposed to be a knockout punch for reasons that we'll get into later. It wasn't a knockout punch. Then boom, Pearl Harbor comes along. Hitler declares war on the United States. America's like, we're busy right now, you know, and so fuck you, fuck me, fuck you. So we declare the same day we do it. But again, Hitler had this mentality like, look, we don't have the Navy that we want. One day we will. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. But right now, Japan, who we've signed this ridiculous document, they attacked the Americans. So the Japanese Navy will keep the American Navy busy. And of course, we just talked about all these ships that we're about to produce. So what he again, because he didn't study America, was like, they're going to keep the Pacific Fleet busy. There's an Atlantic Fleet, motherfucker. You know, it's that's not how this
Oh,
works.
yeah.
It's like we're going to send all the ships over because
Yeah.
we're so
You ever
desperate.
heard of the Panama Canal? You know, we can get over there.
There's a reason why
Yeah.
we built that. Yeah. So that oversimplistic mentality that he had it just didn't fit the situation, and he was going to learn. And don't get me wrong, it was going to take a while. There's still a lot of war between December 7th, 1941, and say late 1944, but it's coming. It's like the train. It's like destiny. It's coming, and he didn't get it. He didn't get it. So anyways, we lined up on number 2. That's special. Let's just take a moment and okay, I'm done. Yeah. So the number one reason why Nazi Germany lost the war, who would like to go first?
We'll go around the horn again. Rhino?
There we go.
I'm going to say, so I'm not saying it's my number 1. These are just 5.
Sure.
I think Hitler's over-reliance on high technology weapons late in the war, it was too little, too late. I mean, it's amazing stuff. Don't get me wrong. It's amazing stuff, but it was too little, too late. He redirected, his engineers to develop a bomber to go bomb New York, with the jet engines, instead of putting all of his cards into, hey, how about we stop all these bombers from bombing us?
Yeah.
Let's make more. Let's make more of these jets, these jet fighters. I think, that's one of the things, while the vengeance weapons were impressive and fueled our space program after the war. The Hitler's vision was misplaced. I know he felt like this was going to change the war. But and it could have if the Me-262 been produced in much higher numbers. When it was available, in 1943, I think it was something that could have really changed the war after the air war over Europe.
Yeah, this goes back to something both you, Ray, and Ryan had said. One, they were built for a short blitzkrieg war. They had to win this war by 1943. And when they didn't, you start doing stuff like that. And number 2, both you guys mentioned about his being an ideologue, about him micromanaging and meddling.
Yeah.
A lot of the weapon systems and the more medium tanks as opposed to fewer and fewer ever larger tanks. All these things were driven literally by Hitler, like visiting factories, like telling people, stop making this. The Sturmgewehr, the first modern assault rifle, that could have been fielded in large numbers in early 1943. Hitler hated it. He thought it was stupid. He wanted bolt action rifles. And then everyone was raving about them. And they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we can make them. So it's interesting. This does tie into some of the other flaws in the man's thinking, his outlook, his blind spots. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, mine, again, not going to amaze anybody, is invading the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa in 1941. And again, we've touched on this a couple of times, but there was so much that Hitler was a good politician. He knew how to get elected. He knew to tell the people what they wanted to hear, and he was going to right the wrongs, whatever. But as far as a military leader, your job is to first learn your enemy so you can defeat your enemy. And he just kind of skipped over that part. So he literally said that Soviet Russia was a colossus. Yes, it is a colossus, but it has a feet of clay, as if I just, with the clay, the whole structure will come down. And just because it was communist, it was a communist government, it was weak. Because they had a communist philosophy, they were weak. Just because everybody hated Stalin for the things we've already talked about, it was weak. Yes, but, and this is one of the great ironies of World War II, of Operation Barbarossa. It doesn't matter if everybody hates the leader. It doesn't matter how cruel he is. It doesn't matter for all of the flaws, and there are certainly a lot of flaws. But at the end of the day, Stalin dictates what's going to happen in Russia. And as long as he doesn't give up, as long as he doesn't surrender, because he controls everything, it's dictator. He's a dictator. So as long as he doesn't surrender, all these people that hate him, they're going to do exactly what he says. That city right there, you make nothing but tanks. You make nothing but rifles. You make nothing but uniforms, whatever. And if they don't do it, they're going to be shot. So they're going to do it. I'm going to take your 16-year-old son. I'm going to put him in a uniform, and I'm not going to train him, and I'm going to throw him at the Germans. And if he doesn't do it, I'm going to shoot him. So the point is, as long as he doesn't give up, Russia doesn't give up. He can do whatever he wants, and he does. We've talked about hundreds of thousands. In fact, the number that I've found is roughly 10 million Russian troops, or Soviet troops, died. Another 10 million civilians died. So 20 million people died, and that was mostly between Europe and the Urals, or Europe and Moscow, I guess I should say. So the point is, as long as this guy doesn't give up, they're not going to give up. So Hitler invades. You've all seen a map. That's a long fucking way to go. Yeah. Here's the thing that most people forget. Army Group Center, which was supposed to take out Moscow, the infantry practically walked to Moscow. So they started late because of the stuff that's going on in Greece. They needed like at least 10,000 more trucks. And there's some very specific things we'll get to in a minute, but you've all heard the expression, you don't get in a land war in Asia, the Princess Bride. It's the same thing for Western Russia, because again, you've got to go all that way. Yep. You've got to deal with that. You've got to supply yourself. You're treating everybody cruelly. They're going to want payback. So the partisans, I'm sure you've read about the partisans. The partisans were extremely effective at messing with Germany's supply lines. And
what were the three generals that they said would defeat the German army?
General Winter. I can't remember. What is
General Mudd?
General Mudd, right?
General Distance, and General Snow.
I like that. And we talked about this, I think, very early on. The Nazi mentality would not let Germany, even temporarily, make any kind of pact with the Ukrainians, the Belarusians, the Slavs in general, and they could have had all these allies. They didn't do any of that. Yep. So, this is my last thing. So, like France, like all the other countries, it was supposed to be a knockout punch. They were supposed to be celebrating, the German troops of Army Group Center were supposed to be celebrating quite comfortably Christmas in Moscow, taking it from all the people, because they were going to reach it, they were going to kick ass, and they were going to take it. And because that did not happen, suddenly it doesn't matter. All the bets are off. Now it's a war of attrition. And there is no way mathematically that Germany can win a war of attrition against Soviet Russia. You can kill 10 men for every one of mine. In fact, they did. Yeah. But as long as Stalin doesn't give up, as long as the Soviet Union doesn't quit fighting, they'll win. It's just a matter of how ugly is it going to be and how long is it going to take.
So let's play a little thought experiment. So my number one as well, you skipped me, but that's okay. You're the host. You're the host. I understand. And in fact, maybe it's a backhanded compliment, because we kind of wanted to make sure you're like our anchor man. And I think you realize that I'm really the anchor man here. So maybe I should go last. Maybe that's what this is. I don't know.
It was subliminal, Tony. He just
I
kind of
know, I
deferred.
just-
He deferred
I'm
to
pulling
you.
a Hitler.
Yeah.
I'm being a megalomaniac over here. I've got all these big blind spots.
Ryan, you go through so much. I
He does.
apologize, Tony.
Yeah,
I
he does.
apologize.
No. It's no
I just
big
got so excited. Sorry.
I know, no, it's cool, but mine
Okay.
was the same thing. But let's play a little thought experiment now.
Please.
So prior to Hitler invading the Soviet Union,
Mhm.
he had France, and then he had allies that actually signed this tripartite pact. And I know the tripartite pact was weak and flimsy paper, but it just shows which direction that these countries were facing.
Yeah.
So the people that were facing and were part of Germany's sphere of influence include Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and Croatia.
Yeah.
Then, of course, Germany goes in and invades all the Balkans, all of Greece. What if, little thought experiment here, what if he had not invaded? What if he had not made this colossal mistake? And you got the Britons who were fighting the Italians in North Africa.
Mhm.
What if Germany can send 100 divisions into North Africa and absolutely annihilate Great Britain, go into Egypt? Because they were already knocking at the door of Egypt
Yes.
with the limited number of troops they had under Rommel. What if they
Yeah.
just wiped them out of there? You would have had the British completely pulled out of the Mediterranean, completely pushed out of Europe. India could have properly been threatened by Germany and maybe in the East. You just think of how lucky we are that
Yeah.
that man made these colossal errors, because he had a
Absolutely.
military instrument at that time that could have just totally changed the face of the world to this day.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it was you, Tony, that mentioned the oil. I mean, because if he doesn't go into Russia, and Stalin is not interested in giving himself any pain, so he'll just sit there with a whole bunch of troops on the border and go, "You don't mess with me, I don't mess with you, because I don't trust you, capitalist sons of bitches." Anyway, so first Germany sends a whole bunch of air units to Italy, and they dominate the Mediterranean. That's done. They then can safely transfer their troops to Northeast. They take Northern Africa. They take Egypt. They take the Suez. But then they take the oil of the Middle East. And then Britain is out of the war unless the Americans want to give them some. But then again, the Germans have got the U-boats. They can cause a lot of trouble. So again, the what ifs, and again, that's just what makes it. The victory at moments was so tenuous.
Yeah.
So it's not like sometimes it's like, I don't have to beat you to beat you. You can just, don't touch this, beat yourself. You know what I'm saying? You can make mistakes. You can make mistakes that unforced errors, as they say in baseball. And he made, I mean, he's the king of unforced error. And it's things like that. But if it had just been a moderately sized another front, whatever, it was the mother of fronts. You know,
the
it's
largest
the Eastern
land
Front.
invasion in the history of human race.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was the bottomless pit that could take everything Germany had.
One of the things I like to add is, it's well known that Hitler idolized Napoleon.
Yes.
And Napoleon was a leader, a military leader that rose from obscurity, as did Hitler. And he had conquered much of Europe, but was undone by Russia.
Right.
And Hitler has been quoted as saying that, as struggles mounted, that he's not going to be, I'm not going to let Russia undo me.
Right.
Well, that was part of the undoing, wasn't it?
Exactly.
So, I think that, I think that's probably a lot of what, fueled Hitler's, desire to conquer so much land, was he had Napoleon as a roadmap.
Right. Yeah. And
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it didn't work out.
Bigger question for you guys, but go ahead.
No, just it didn't work out for Napoleon, and it didn't work out for him.
No, it didn't. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So be careful. I know I'm your role model, but you might want to look closer. There's some flaws here, believe it. Go ahead, Tony. Don't say anything. Don't say anything.
Oh my gosh. All right. So let me ask you guys this. I've pondered this. You have mentioned, Ray, and I agree with you, rightly so, and Ryan, that the USSR, the communist system of government, was all about Stalin, central planning, do this or die. They were able to literally move factories past mountains to keep the supply going. They were able to reconstitute seemingly out of whole cloth, whole army and army corps that were completely wiped out and wasted.
Yeah.
Would that system also have failed if Germany was able to go and focus more on Army Group Center and actually take and conquer Moscow.
Mm.
Were the communists set up? Were they
Mm.
so centrally planned by taking out that central city with all the railroad networks that supplied everything, with all the figures of thoughts, all the gulags, all the NKVD,
Yeah.
all of those things I know that they could go into exile somewhere east, but would
Yeah.
that have been enough to cause the USSR to collapse?
I don't know. I don't know about you, Ryan, but that's an excellent question because, again, as long as Stalin, because remember, Stalin was going to leave Moscow when the war had first started, but as they get closer, he's like, no, I'm going to stay, and that's what bolstered a lot of people.
Yes.
So on one hand, you're right. If Stalin leaves Moscow, I can't remember what exactly is behind it. I know there was a huge training ground that they had. Once they would create an army, they would keep armies, and I do mean massive armies in reserve, but I don't know what's back there. But he could have backed up and kept the war effort going. But you're right. How effective could it have been had he not had Moscow? Because it's like Rome, all railroads lead to Moscow. So just because I will it doesn't suddenly create roads everywhere, unless you're going to build me a whole bunch of different tracks, different roads. So it would have been difficult, to say the least. But and depending on how far they backed up, I mean, does that mean that the German supply line has to be another 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles? So
Right.
that is probably the best what if question, because it divides the advantages and the disadvantages that Stalin had. That's a brilliant question.
So I've always wondered that when I've read
Yeah.
books about how close they got. It's like,
Yeah.
what would that have done to morale, to supply all of that? It's a what if. We don't know.
Yeah.
And thank God we don't. I mean,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
I mean, so was Hitler I mean, because you think about it, I've always marveled at Hitler. His sphere of influence. We've all seen the maps of Europe and the cartoons from the 40s, and the big swastika covers all of Central Europe and everything. And I've always wondered, I'm like, well, how was he ever thinking of supplying all this? I mean, obviously he was going to conscript everybody in all these countries and force them to work for
Right.
him and everything. And I guess he would have thought the same with Russia, because you're overstretching yourself, and I guess at that point, he was just planning on utilizing the infrastructure to keep everything, I guess, under his thumb. So I don't know.
Right. Well, we've made a couple of general quotes. Another Hitler quote was, look, and I can't remember the exact wording, I apologize. Look, if I had known they had that many units or that many tanks, I wouldn't have went in the first place. I mean, I think he said it to Mussolini. So it's like, fuck me. But see, and I'll make this real quick. So here's Berlin, here's Moscow here. And of course, he knows that Russia's got a whole bunch of troops along the border, because they don't trust Germany.
Yeah.
His thinking is, I'll smash all of the troops here, and then there'll be other troops around the major cities, Kiev, Smolensk. But I should just be able to get on the good road and just all the way to Moscow. But you're right. They just keep producing armies after armies that most of them get slaughtered. But it takes time. It takes bullets to kill 100,000, 600,000. I think it was Kiev where 600,000 troops were surrounded, and eventually most of them died. But that takes time. So again, it had to be a knockout punch. The second it's not a knockout punch because of Stalin's attitude, the war is over. It's just a matter of when. And the last thing I'll say about this is starvation in the cold, fighting to survive. The odds are against you. For a Russian peasant, that's a Tuesday. No big deal. For everybody else, it breaks their soul. But for those people who are like, no, this is all I know. This is literally all I know. And so they struggled because what else had they known? That's it.
I want to know, Ray, I want to reinforce what you just said. We were on your show last year and we just shared a couple of clips from, some of the veterans we featured in the previous year. And one of them was a German soldier we interviewed Johannes Grew, who fought in Leningrad. And he talked about the peasants. They would take these cabbage barrels, the Germans who occupied the houses, they kicked all the peasants out, and he used them as latrines. So, and these cabbage barrels had some cabbage in the bottom still, but the Germans didn't eat those. They just they peed in them and did all their stuff. Yeah. And in the winter, all that froze. And Johannes Grew said he woke up one night, he heard a noise. He thought it was a sapper coming in their position. He goes and looks, and it was one of the peasants chiseling out a frozen piece of cabbage from the bottom of this frozen shit and piss latrine to bring
Yeah.
it home and eat it.
Yeah.
So
Because it was
you,
better than not.
and that I think that amplifies what you're saying about what the peasants had to deal with and what they got dragged along. That
Yeah.
there was a lot of misery in that war.
Is that where the name sauerkraut came from?
Oh, Ryan. Oh.
Could be. Or it was probably a
I'm
worse
just-
name. Yeah.
I
a
think
legitimate
that's a great
question.
question. I think that's a
legitimate
great question.
So once again, Tony's story has proven to us, not that there was any doubt, we
No
are
value.
not tough. We are don't. I know we come across, but no, we're not tough. We walk like John Wayne because
Yeah.
that's all we can do. But there's no toughness here. I've never
have
mistaken
we have
for
to
Rambo.
pray that our wealth, our technology, our overwhelming abundance allows us to
all I
never
got.
have to get in the position where we're chiseling out
Yeah.
cabbage
gosh.
from a frozen
Yeah.
latrine.
Because I will cry and
Oh.
make you uncomfortable in a second. That's my defenses. That's
I'm gonna
all I
make
got.
you uncomfortable.
That's not very sensitive, Ray. You should have some more empathy for my feelings when things are going to shit like that.
No, not you. I'm just saying, if anybody wanted to come at me, I would apologize so bad while you're beating me up. I would make you uncomfortable, not you, the attacker uncomfortable. There's no toughness.
They get a couple of butts
Oh
in,
my
they're
gosh.
like, nah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Never mind.
Wow,
Help you out,
he's
buddy.
he's kind of squishy when I hit him.
Yeah,
Like, that's
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
It bounces off.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. That was completely
He-
unnecessary.
He's like a ribeye. He's kind of marbled.
Right.
What's up with that? You know?
Did you want any? Okay. So I think we all agree. Let's see here. Not finishing off Britain.
Yeah.
Classic mistake. Declaring war on America when you don't have to. As fucked up as we are,
Yeah.
don't give us a reason to unite against you. Just don't.
Amen.
And of course, picking on people whose lives are hard could not be harder. Not a smart move. You know, and that kind of. So was there any other general? Oh, and just not. Well, my thing was, don't try to do everything at once. That is not the way wars are won. The more you focus, the more you achieve, and that's not what Hitler was about.
Yep. So really, to sum it up, poor strategy and picking on the wrong people.
Yeah.
Misallocation of materials and men, and not, like you said, not being strategic about it.
Yeah, we're good. We should do this for a living. Anyway, so this is going to end up on YouTube. Be kind. You can respectfully disagree with us and leave our mothers out of the comments. There's no reason to bring them in. Just tell us what you think, but also let us know if we got it right. So this will come out soon, and then and if anybody has any ideas about the next top 5,
Ooh.
whatever we could cover, let us know.
Maybe it's Japan.
I'm sorry.
Maybe
And what?
the top 5 blunders of Japan.
Ooh, okay. I
That
like
would be
that.
an interesting one.
I
Maybe we
like
could
that.
do that. It's a
I
part
like
2,
that.
so to speak.
Yeah.
We
I
could
like
bookend it, you know?
Yes.
So-
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Just
Ray,
check.
Ray, we want to thank you for inviting us to do
Yeah.
this. We have a lot
Sure.
of fun geeking out on history on your show, you know, with your audience and all that. And I think we should do that. Let's have a conversation on what the next one should be, and we'll kick it out there. And I love the comments. And we're like those twins. If your audience gets on here in the comments, start making fun of our mom, that's bullcrap. We can make fun of our mom.
Right, but nobody else. Yeah. And if
Yeah.
someone says something bad about Ron, be like, "Hey, that's a good point," but still, you don't say it. You don't. We all saw it. You don't have to bring
We
it
all
up.
saw it. Yeah.
We also
Why did you say it out loud?
We're all
he
thinking-
knows.
I'm joking.
Hey,
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank you also, Ray. I mean,
Absolutely.
you're a guy that we've always enjoyed. We look forward to not only just doing these shows with you, but even talking to you, off the air whenever we do some stuff with you here and there and everything. So
I
hopefully
appreciate
we'll
that.
have a lot more stuff coming between collaborations between the Warrior Next Door and the History of World War II podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming, hopefully.
And I appreciate his guy again. I love your I love what you do, because if I wasn't doing this, I would love to do that. So you guys, it's just the coolest thing ever. And again, I think I think one of you mentioned this stuff is going to the Library of Congress amongst other places, so it will be preserved forever. And that's just priceless. So again, I really appreciate what you do. And like Ryan was hinting at, we might have an idea where you might see more of us together. That's not a threat. So don't even. But if it does happen, we will certainly let you know when we can. Again, guys, thank you for coming on. It's the Warrior Next Door podcast. Check it out, and you will see these guys soon. And I'm very sorry about that.